Hi guys, welcome to the podcast. Before we start, we just want to introduce you to our sponsor. Our sponsor is the Twitter handle @MugsNFL. They're a company that offer a range of custom items such as mugs, t-shirts, crewneck jumpers, and hoodies, all customized with your favorite sports player or your sports team. That can be any sport ranging from the NFL through to the NBA to UK sports. All you have to do for an extra 10% off your order is drop them a message on Twitter quoting our podcast, that is the Hardwood Hoops podcast, and they'll get 10% off your next order. Cheers and enjoy the show. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Hardwood Hoops podcast. I'm here, as always, with Ben.
Hello there.
How you doing, buddy?
Yeah, very well, as usual. Yourself?
Yeah, everything's great, thanks. Very happy to be here for episode 6 now, which seems crazy that it's gone by so fast.
I know. Unbelievable.
Just a big thank you to everyone again, as always, for listening. We got some good response to our top 10 and a couple of people agree and disagree. And we've got our interview with our friend Joel, who's a sneaker expert, lined up for later in the week. So that'll be another little bonus pod for the end of the week for you guys.
Yeah, looking forward to that one. Get into a sort of a deep dive on the shoes that we like and love, and maybe some that we hate and detest. So we will see.
Yeah, it should be fun. But today we're going to start again, as we do with our normal early week pods, with a bit of news, and then we're going to move on to a main topic that I'll let Ben speak about later. But first of all, any updates? The only updates we've got news this week is we've had more positive tests across the NBA. We're not going to read out player by player because obviously it's going to get to a point where you're just reading out a list of names, but the increase in tests across certain teams have led to a closure of some practice facilities before Orlando, which isn't ideal. Teams such as the Clippers, the Bucks, the Heat, the Kings have all had to close practice facilities to try and stop the spread. And there's almost a decision being made they're not going to reopen. They're just going to get to Orlando and restart training there because obviously there's tests every day. Once you're in the bubble and you've had 2 negative tests, the idea is you shouldn't obviously get it in the bubble. So they're trying to combat the issue by just stopping that training for teams now and wait until Orlando. What are your thoughts on A, that development, but B, also the idea that some teams might get not a lot of time to train?
A couple of big teams in there, and the Sacramento Kings. I think, yeah, it could be detrimental. Obviously, when you've seen all the pictures of them all out training and getting back to working with each other, even if they're not directly running full team run-throughs and stuff, because I think there's a limit on how many they can have and etc. It's still getting back to know each other, that chemistry, get that shot, get your feet back under you, and it could potentially impact those teams later on when you get into Orlando. But if it's gonna, if closing it down now means the rest of the season and the championship can go ahead, then it's definitely going to be worth it. I think people just need to be stricter with themselves and what they're doing, and who they're seeing, and what's going on around them. Although it may have eased where you are in the country, you still need to think about the job you have at hand, which is going to play basketball, and that you need to be 100% fit and healthy. So if that means isolating in your house and not seeing friends and family for a little bit longer, then I'm afraid that's what you're going to have to do. So I guess it's just where your allegiances lie. It's a difficult one, but we just desperately want to see some basketball, and it seems like the NBA does as well, because they haven't budged, have they?
No, definitely. That was one of the next notes I was going to say, was even though we've had these tests, it's still, obviously they've closed practice facilities, so that's not all steam ahead, but the overall Orlando bubble plan, resume the league plan, there's been absolutely no budge, no murmurs of discontent, no murmurs that they're going to change their plan. They're full speed ahead, and they've almost added extra precaution by shutting these facilities to say, we think our Orlando plan's spot on, but we don't want to jeopardize that by people bringing the disease or loads of people getting it and not being able to travel to Orlando in a few weeks' time. So I think, yeah, it's very clever. It could lead to a slow start in Orlando in terms of the actual basketball, because obviously people might get less fitness time or less actual basketball practice time. But obviously, overall, when you've got the 8 regular seasons, there's a bit of a buffer. I know some teams want to obviously need those 8 games, but it can be almost like a little bit of a pre-season for certain teams, like we said with the Bucks, for example.
Yeah, I don't know. They definitely need that sort of pre-season time and time to, like I said, get the legs under and get the shots up. But safety outweighs everything. So shut it down if you need to. That's what they said they'd do all along, and they're stuck to their word. So, hats off to them, really.
Yeah, and it might lead to them being able to get more time in, actual practice time in Orlando. We'll go to Orlando earlier once people obviously get those 2 negative tests to be allowed to go. It could actually lead to a bit of a change in format for those individual teams, because some teams obviously were going straight to Orlando anyway and not going home for training camps, like the Nets, for example, but then they got switched back to New York, and that's where players started getting it. So it's almost like the NBA is actually realizing their bubble idea is even better than they thought, and anyone training in their own facilities is a negative. So let's almost watch this space really and just hope that we don't get any more disruptions to the schedule.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Get them in there as quickly as possible and keep it as clean as possible.
Yeah, and another little Orlando-based note, the last bit of news really, in a bit of a slow week, is Victor Oladipo has come out and said that he's not going to play in Orlando for the Pacers. He's still going to go and support the team, I believe. He maybe even go to the pre-Orlando practice, I'm not sure. But he's decided not to actually play in Orlando. We're not really sure on his exact reasoning. Obviously, he's had a lot of major injuries. He's been involved in a lot of trade rumours, and he's a free agent next summer. So whether there could be a move on his cards, or just worried about, obviously, all the injuries he's had, probably the latter is more of a reason. Because obviously he's not worried about the health side, because he's still going to go. He's still going to be exposed to that environment. He's just not actually going to commit to the basketball side. So it seems to be more of a long-term future for him rather than anything else, I think, Ben.
Yeah, maybe because he had a few moments when he came back from his injury, but he never looked his old self. And I don't know if he was maybe even a bit of a hindrance to the team at the time, because they built up this amazing chemistry. You look at the Pacers roster and you think, well, there's some good players, but they're not going to make too much of themselves. And they've slotted themselves into a really good position in the East. And him coming back didn't help. It didn't improve them. So, A, why risk him if we're playing so well? And B, why risk changing what's going well? It could be the thinking behind it, or it could be they want to keep him healthy in order for a trade. It is a bit of a cutthroat business, but I feel like Victor Oladipo is one of those players that, unless it's gonna not benefit the team or not benefit himself, he'd be playing. So there's definitely more going on behind the scenes than we know, and it may come out over the next few days, few weeks, or whatever. But I am interested to sort of keep a bit of an eye on this story and see where it goes, because Oladipo at 100% health on top of his game is a dangerous player.
Yeah, definitely one of the better guards in the East over the last couple of years, aside from injury, of course. Yeah, there's been a lot of rumours since this announcement that he's almost put his Pacers' future on hold, and that a summer trade could be in the works, with obviously only having a year left. If the Pacers feel like they can't re-sign him, obviously cashing in now, especially before he comes back from playing from his injury again more long-term, because you don't know if he's going to look the same. They might almost be a better value at the moment, with obviously people desperate to improve this off-season. But the Pacers president did say that apparently he said this in his statement. He said, "We totally respect and understand Victor's decision not to play in the restart of the season. The first priority for our players will always be their health, whether it's physical or mental. Victor's looked great in workouts, but the timing of the restart and the lack of 5-on-5 activities had in the last months make it difficult for him to commit to playing at a high level without exploiting himself to further injury." So it seems to be injury-based and almost like future contract, future move, future, even if it's with the Pacers, doesn't want to jeopardize that future of his NBA career, which makes sense, I think.
Yeah, his head's clearly not in it, and in which case it's a smart decision. And like I said, he's one of those guys that I think will put himself out there and commit to the team as much as he feels comfortable with. And I think he shows that by saying, "Look, I don't think I'm ready to play myself. However, I can still be a help to the team by coming out and supporting and offering my guidance." Which, how many other players are going to do that? A very, very few, if any. So, what a player.
Yeah, definitely. And a little word just to maybe give Pacers fans a boost. I think it's encouraging, A, that he's going to be around the team, but B, also citing that he wants to work on rehab whilst he's there. If he saw his future definitely outside the Pacers organisation, you'd think he'd rather sort help from outside and from his own experts rather than going with that. But if he wants to do extra rehab with the team doctors and stuff, I think that's a good sign if you're a Pacers fan, at least. Better than we thought maybe when we heard the initial news that he just wasn't going to play.
Yeah, definitely. I think the Pacers will do anything in their power to re-sign him. The only thing that could stop it, I think, would be some sort of ridiculous trade offer, which in the current market and climate, I can't see it happening. So I reckon
his injury history.
Exactly. So I reckon Pacers want him and he wants the Pacers. So I think it's going to be a match.
Cool. Last little note on that is it probably does. We're going to do a prediction podcast and delve a bit more into that in the coming weeks, but it doesn't look good for the Pacers in terms of this Orlando restart. I think Lamb also isn't playing. I think he's out injured.
Okay.
So obviously no Lamb, no Oladipo, or definitely no Oladipo at least. The team's prospects are not looking amazing, just in terms of actually getting far in the competition. So that's a bit of a shame, but as we said, nothing that can be helped, and they'll be doing all they can to make next season their year just before Oladipo does enter free agency.
Yeah.
Cool, all right.
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, let's move on. We haven't got much news. That was it, which is good for our next topic. So I'm just going to hand over to Ben, who's going to introduce what we're going to do and talk about. Take it from there, Ben.
So today we are going to talk about what they have been dubbed as the Delete 8. So those unlucky 8 teams that probably should be more than 8 teams, but we've spoken about that in the past, that didn't make the Orlando cut. So what we've done is we've divided them up. We've got 4 teams each, and we're going to use every teacher's favourite saying that gets a giggle in class when you bring it out, but it's a great opportunity to call a child stupid. We're going to use the KISS approach. Keep it simple, stupid. So for each of the 8 teams, we're going to come up with 2 bullet points, of which we think if they do that over the off season or the current, time coming up next season, whatever it may be, they can start climbing back up that ladder, make some playoff runs, and maybe get themselves into a championship. But without these 2 bullet points, there is no way they're going to make it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. More GM should probably keep it simple, and they're a little bit stupid, so it works well.
Yeah, definitely. Hopefully they'll tune in. Who knows? So first team, we're going to hand over to Liam. Who have you got lined up as your first team you want to kiss?
Cool. Right. So I was debating which order to do it in, but I've decided to go for to start with the team that's most likely to bounce back or have a success next season after not a good season this year. So we're going to start with the Golden State Warriors.
I was worried you would come in with some sort of Knicks pun then, but
no. Pistons, future champions. Should start with them. But no, we've gone with the Warriors. So everyone knows worst record in the NBA, best chance at the first pick. Obviously had a bad season. They've lost KD. He was going to be injured anyway, but obviously we spoke about him last week. They lost him in free agency. Steph, Clay, and Looney have all missed a lot of time with injuries this year. Obviously, Steph and Clay haven't played all season since the first game for Steph. Looney has hardly played as well. I think he's only started about 11 games, I think. So he was also either a top 6 rotation player or a starting 5 over the years.
Yeah.
So that's why they're in this position. And they're 2 bullet points. So first, it's very simple. Count on their returning players to be the same level when they left. So it's almost nothing really. It's not rush them back. Obviously, the extra break helps. Take the time in the rehab. Take your time in pre-season before the season starts. and get those 3 players back. So get Steph, Clay, and Looney in your lineup along with Draymond. That's 4 of your 5 straight away, and just playing those 4 in your 5 almost makes you a top. Well, I don't know, to be honest. You could even say a top 3 Western team without even any rotation with that team. So I think that's key. Like I said, not rushing them back, but trying to get them back as soon as possible in the correct manner. But I just think time is on their side with that. So they almost don't need to do anything except for just let time play out and hope the season starts at the date they want it to, which is obviously in December, because that's enough time for all their injuries and them to come back fully healthy. So that was the first bullet point, which is an easy one for them to do. Don't make any big moves. Don't trade any of those players in any deals. Keep them 3 around along with Draymond and get them in the team. Bullet point 2. So I think this is probably just as important as number 1. They need to trade their draft pick, wherever it is, alongside either the Iguodala trade exception, Andrew Wiggins, or both. I think they want to keep Wiggins from everything I read. So I think that's less likely, but I think they need to trade the pick and the trade exception, which I think was over 11 million. So you're talking you can get a 10 to 15 million player at least without having to include Wiggins. And I think this could be the key for them to add an extra rotation piece, someone to help them in their top 6-7 rotation, someone ideally a wing player who can shoot threes and defend. I don't want them to go for someone too old, obviously, for the age of the squad, but just getting someone who can be an instant starter or an instant 6th man off the bench and really improve the overall depth of that team. And then just let your stars be your stars, really. And if you can include Wiggins in the deal, you're talking over a £30 million player. So you're talking an all-star at that point. I think that's unlikely, but I think just adding someone of high caliber is going to be key to this team for challenging the Clippers and Lakers next year. And my prediction is they probably will be at least 3rd in the West if they follow my bullet points and get lucky with injuries. Obviously, you don't know if Clay could come back after an ACL and hurt his knee in a different way. That's just something we can't predict. But if those players come back and they add this older piece who's not a rookie, not a first or second pick in the draft, I think they could be a top 3 team again easily in the West next year.
Yeah, I think they should hang on to Wiggins and give him the benefit of the doubt and see how he fits amongst these other pieces. He could. I feel like he could fit that team really well. Almost.
Yeah, he's very athletic, which they need.
Exactly, be like a young Iguodala basically for them. So you think they should trade away this young piece, their pick, whatever number they get, and not think about the future. Just go for it while the dynasty's still around. Just try and get as many chips under your belt as possible.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Stephen, I did have the dates, but I can't remember now. Steph and Clay are under contract for a number of more years. Looney's still got 2 years. I think Draymond might be up there actually for an extension, or he might have signed one this season actually. So they've already got those key pieces locked up. Wiggins has still got 2.5 years on his deal. So looking to the future is good, but who are they going to be playing with? You don't necessarily want to have this player that's going to be on a 5-year rookie deal, not contribute much for maybe year 1, year 2, and then okay, he's ready to contribute. But Steph's 33, Clay's 31 with obviously knee injuries. Draymond's 33, obviously always has weight issues in the regular season. Looney's a little bit injury prone and probably looking for a big contract at that point. I think they're going to struggle for that player to have as much impact as maybe a veteran could. Mm-hmm. The benefit of keeping him is obviously having a smaller salary cap longer term. But they've got such a high percent chance of getting the number 1 pick, and there's no standout player. It'd be very different, if this year was Zion, for example. If you're adding Zion to this mix, it's a different story, isn't it? But this year, there's no key number 1 player. There was rumours that they liked, I can't remember his name now, they liked the wing player that was ranked 5th on the average draft board. So most draft board experts had him at 5, and apparently he's the leading candidate if the Warriors got the number 1 pick. And that just proves that if 90% of the league see him as 4th, 5th pick, and the Warriors think, oh yeah, he's probably the best for our system, he's not a standout number 1 pick. I do think if they fall to like pick 5, which is the lowest they can fall, that might be a position where they think, right, we're not going to get enough for this piece. Our player's still there, wing, defensive, 3 shooting wing. Then they could change their mind. But I think overall, before that trade exception runs out, which I think is January, they'd be better off packaging it with the pick or next year's pick and trying to move on for a key player.
Okay, nice. Love those bullet points. Really, really good.
Cool. Who's your first on your list then?
I'm going to start with the Bulls because out of the four that I've got, I think, like you, well, potentially, they've got a lot of promise. They've got some good pieces. They've got some great pieces. They've got some great players. I mean, Zach LaVine had a fantastic season, and I think they've started moving forward. Much like you, my first bullet point for them is to get healthy. Too many injuries this season. Whether they need a change in medical staff, I don't know, because they seem to be changing that sort of, changing over some of the staff, which is a good start. And I think that is going to help them long term. So get healthy, definitely, because they have had an injury-plagued season. They've had people in and out of the lineups. Their starting lineup on the opening night, I think, only actually had like full games with each other, which isn't good enough if you want to really challenge. And I think the East is soft enough for them to make a challenge. They could easily make a playoff run with the pieces they've got next season. Which leads me on to the second bullet point I've got for them, which is get a new head coach. Jim Boylan can be a good head coach. He just doesn't fit this system. For example, his talk with Lauri Markkanen. So he went from 80 touches a game to 40 touches a game this season compared to last season. And he went to Jim and said, look, why is this reduced? What can I do? How can I play better in the system? Blah, blah, blah. And he said, well, you just got to get in. You just got to rebound the ball. And
yeah, that's exactly why I read that.
And Laurie apparently turned to him and said, oh, yeah, easy. I'll just get 40 defensive rebounds a game. You can't turn a player like that into a rim-running big man. He's a scorer. He's not one that's going to stand in the post and get the ball. I know he's a big guy, but that's not how he plays. You can't force him to play a way that he's not there for. If you want someone like that, get in a big center that's going to do that. That's their biggest change, I think. They need that new coach, bit of fresh blood, pull the locker room back in together and make a push. I think any good coach could get a fantastic amount out of these players. When you look down the roster, Wendell Carter Jr., Chris Dunn's there, got Zach LaVine, obviously, Lauri Markkanen, Otto Porter Jr., if he can be healthy, Kobe White, who they drafted this year. I know he's a bit older, but Thaddeus Young is a great piece to have there. There's some talent on this roster. And I guess as a half bullet point, just at the end here, use the last dance hype. Push that media, get some fans back on board, get everybody behind the team and make a push. So that's my thoughts on the Chicago Bulls.
Yep, nice. I would definitely agree, especially the second point. That was, as soon as you said what team you were covering, my head was just thinking new head coach. Like that has to be one of the things. Whether he's got a good system or not, obviously everyone will debate what they debate, but it's quite clear that it doesn't fit the players they've got. So either you need new players or you need a new coach. A lot of their players have been drafted. A lot of their players are on rookie deals. A lot of those players are going to want to get paid at some point, but obviously not now. Some of them are on huge deals, obviously like Otto Porter. So yeah, I just think it just didn't fit the players they've got. And it's obviously much easier to change a coach that's not succeeding and with not a good message than it is to change 9 of your players, 6 of them being drafted in the last 3 years. So yeah, I definitely agree.
He's had his moments. Like, it's been interesting to watch. I mean, it's about, I don't know, it's sort of made the Bulls interesting to watch this season. Like 2 minutes left, they're down by 20, and he calls a timeout. Like, why? What are you doing?
Yeah.
Apparently, he uses them as teaching moments. But
yeah, which makes sense. But he's not in touch with the players today, I don't think, and the way the league is today, rather than what college basketball was like years ago. It's just, I don't think it's quite the right fit.
No, definitely not. So yeah, that's my summary on the Bulls, and I expect to see another championship coming their way. Who have you got next?
Well, I might veer off the idea of who's most likely to come back and win. We'll go on to the Knicks. So I'll start with a half bullet point, like you ended with a half. My half would be get a new owner, which they have absolutely no control over and they can't really do. So, but
that should
the
be
honest
your
answer,
full bullet point.
yeah, the honest answer would be to get a new owner. But obviously, the person who makes the decisions is the owner, so he's not going to get rid of himself. So I don't think that's a realistic one. So I focused on two other ones. The first main point was quite easy, really. Pick the right head coach. We all know they're looking for head coaches now. They're interviewing everyone, every man and their dog, it would seem. But it's definitely better than picking a certain list like they've done in the past, because how do you know that someone might not be the best option, or might not bring something to the table, or might not present an idea that you could move forward with a different coach? I think interviewing as many people as you can with this long break is probably an actual clever way to go about it, which is good. Scott Perry has showed that he is quite a clever individual, so I think that's quite good of him to do that. So yeah, the first bullet point is pick the right coach to help develop the current players and build a new culture around the team. And the basis of that is they've got a lot of young talent now. Obviously, Knox has seemed to have petered out a little bit. Maybe that could be due to the coaching and the turmoil of the team. But obviously, you've got Mitchell Robinson, RJ Barrett, and then you've got other young pieces that people aren't sure about. But you've got two key ones to build upon there. And also, you've got 7 first-round picks in the next 4 years. So almost the next 4-year span. And an average coach is about 2-year span, GM 4 to 5 sometimes. So they're almost like they can marry up the next 2-3 years. They've got 5 picks, and then year 4 they've got the 6th and 7th. So we know they've acquired them from the Mavs and Clippers for the Porzingis trade, and the trade that sent I've forgotten his name now. The Twins, the Morris twin to the Clippers. Yeah, so they've got 7 picks over 4 years, and they've also got 2 swaps, so they can pick if they want to swap first-round picks and second-round picks in the next 3 years. So they've got very, very, not a great draft haul, not an OKC draft haul, but a very good, positive draft haul. And I think you need the right coach in mind who can develop the players, or you need the right coach where then you draft players that fit his system. There needs to be a marrying of ideas, that it can't just be almost best player available or most famous player available. I think they need to match those two up. That would be my first point. Who that is very difficult, especially when you're obviously not involved in the process. Some people have a lot of ideas. Some people have been away from the game and changed. And obviously some of the coaches are G League coaches or assistant coaches that, like you or I, are going to have no idea of like their philosophies as such.
Yeah.
So it's very hard, but to say pick the right head coach, that's obviously an easy statement. But I think they need to pick it with the idea of developing players and building a culture around the players they think are key. And if they don't think those young players are key, then obviously you need to make this year's draft, next year's draft, to find those key players and move on from the ones that you don't like. You don't necessarily have to stick with these young players, but you've got assets to trade at least to get the ones you want. So I think that's quite key. And my last one's quite interesting. That it's a two-parter that almost don't really work together. So trade for Chris Paul, or / do not sign any major free agents. So you're trading for a major player, but not signing any free agents. Okay. So the point of trading for Chris Paul is we all know that obviously the Knicks are now run by Leon Rose. He's represented Chris Paul for years. He's represented a lot of players, and he could actually be the key to turn the franchise around, because he has a lot of connections, and everyone you hear just says how well he does in his job. The rumours are that he wants to trade for Chris Paul. Chris Paul is the literally perfect player to help build a culture, and the most perfect player to help sign other players. They're not going to trade for LeBron James. And aside from LeBron James, Chris Paul, obviously NFLPA, veteran. Look what he's done with OKC this year. He's the perfect player, and also bring a bit of star power to New York. But alongside that, they do not want to sign any free agents this year if they trade for Chris Paul, because this year's class is not very good at all. Gordon Hayward is actually the head of this year's class, which I like Gordon Hayward, but obviously with his injuries, that says a lot, I think, in terms of how good this free agent class is. So I don't think they should waste any money. Obviously, last year they did a lot of 1-year deals. That's fine. If you just want to use your cap like you have to, that's fine. But just don't clog up positions for your young players, and don't waste it on 3-year deals for players that are just not good enough. The year after, you've obviously got Chris Paul, LeBron James, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, Mike Conley, Kyle Lowry, Drew Holiday, Rudy Gobert, Anthony Davis, Giannis, Aldridge. They're all free agents the year after. Obviously,
Love
some of
how
them have got.
low down Giannis is on that list, by the way.
Yeah, I think it's because he's unrestricted. So yeah, obviously he's got an option just to re-sign for that year. But even players like Victor Oladipo, who we spoke about earlier, is also on that list. And you've got loads of glue guys like Danny Green, Andre Iguodala, JJ Redick, Justice Winslow, Trevor Ariza. There's a much better pool of players, so don't waste your cap space this year long term. But I think Chris Paul could be the player to help them get those free agents in the future alongside Leon Rose, whilst also winning a few more games and getting bums in seats rather than having the fans always turn against you.
Yeah, I love those. Obviously, the new coach is a big thing. We've talked about it before. And I think going back to the Bulls, sort of once the Knicks pick their head coach, the rest of the head coaches can sort of fall in place then. So I think it's kind of, this is the peak for some reason, and the rest will fall in line after that. And I love the trade for Chris Paul point. I think that's brilliant. Not, you've got a lot of young guards, young point guards, young shooting guards that, well, Chris Paul has proved how much he can develop a guard just by looking at his record in OKC in this one season. You look at, Dennis Schroeder has come on leaps and bounds, and it would be amazing to see him in a big franchise again on the main stage, doing the wonderful things he can do with the ball whilst promoting and supporting the guys you've got there already, because you do have some good young pieces that I don't know, for whatever reason, aren't quite shining the way that they should be or could be. And yeah, they have a terrible habit of chucking money at people that don't really deserve it. So if they can sort of refrain from doing that, then I think those are some fantastic points. And if they are able to stick to your points, then yeah, they'll do well.
Yeah, I think that the key with Chris Paul is he's on a huge contract, very overpaid. So you might not have to give up as much as you'd think to get him because of his age, but you're almost buying him almost getting him to help your culture and help attract other players, rather than, obviously, you're not saying Chris Paul's going to be our guard for 5 years. That's not the case. You're saying Chris Paul's probably going to be our guard for two years, and then maybe we'll re-sign him at a cheaper deal for his last 2 years. And in that 2 to 3 year period, he might help build culture and attract other players.
Yeah.
And it obviously, the caveat is it depends what you give away. If they give away 2 firsts and the pick swap for a second, then that really kills point one because you've got a lot less to build with. But if they're trading Kevin Knox, I don't know, Frank Ntilikina, like a 2024 first round pick and a 2023 Dallas pick when they've got Luka, so they could obviously have the pick might be in the 20s. That makes a lot more sense than saying, oh yeah, we'll trade the next 2 years of our picks, because the Knicks could obviously be pick one in the next 2 years. So I think obviously it very much depends as any trade does. But yeah, that'd be my points.
Lovely.
Who's second on your list?
So I'm going to go with the Hawks next. The Atlanta Hawks. Much like the Bulls, there's a lot of promise there. Obviously, with Trae Young, incredible point guard for someone so young. Great handles on the ball, fantastic with his assists, and obviously his shooting is crazy. And they were pushing in the right direction, I think, towards the end of last season, trading to get Jeff Teague back, because the offense just disappears when Trae Young's off the court, and Trae Young is terrible defensively, and Jeff Teague is a fairly big point guard. He'll put a shift in. He doesn't mind getting stuck in and doing the dirty work. So I think that was great from them. And obviously trading for Clint Capella, who I think will be very dangerous paired with Trae Young. Apparently he leads the league in assists under the rim, and having someone like Clint Capella there with him to finish those off is filthy. And they suffered this year with John Collins being out for 25 games for it was a ban, wasn't it? So things didn't quite go their way. So bullet point 1 I've got is sign a bigger free agent, if not go for 2 smaller pieces to try and flesh out that roster a bit more. Not so much as I think they desperately need those pieces to win more games, but to show Trae Young they have the intent of filling out the roster with more talent for him, because he said, I want to go for this. I want to win now. I want to take us, all the way as soon as possible. And I think to keep him on side and keep him happy and keep their franchise ticking over and in the limelight, that's what I think they need to do. Maybe go after, I don't know, who's a big name, like maybe go after Gordon Hayward this season, or a Brandon Ingram, or whoever's available, or someone like that. Just throw some money at them, and because they've got quite a bit of cap space. I think they've got 50 million somewhere, something like that in their cap space. So even if you don't sign them, you're putting the message across. Look, Trae, we're trying to win now. We want you to be happy. We want to push this franchise forward. We want to keep you around. I think that's point 1. Try and sign someone, or at least make it look like you're going to.
I like Hayward, or I like Gallinari there. I really do.
Yeah, Gallinari is another name that's come up. He could slot in perfectly. It's just someone to draw the attention off Trae Young, get a bit of an offensive wing rather than just going point guard and big.
A bit more shooting spread across the floor, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
What's your second bullet point then?
Second bullet point I've got is about John Collins. So his contract is up for renewal soon. And it's a tricky situation because it's one of those ones where if they go out and chuck money at a free agent and it doesn't work out, and then they come back to him and go, okay, yeah, turns out we didn't get anyone, so we are going to extend your contract. He might have a bit of a paddy about it and throw a strop and then be like, no, you didn't come to me first. I want to be traded, blah, blah, blah. So my second bullet point is because I think he's great. I think he shows a lot of potential and he helps the team win. There's no doubt about that. I think they need to sit down with him and have a real good chat. So my bullet point 2 is to talk to John Collins. I think they could use this 25-game ban as a bit of a look. Because of your ban, we are now out of the playoffs, essentially, almost sort of strong-arm him and say, look, let's put off the extension talks another 6 months.
See or maybe a cheaper extension.
Yeah, or perhaps a cheaper extension, and see if we can sign someone else, and then see how we get on this season, and then start to talk about contract extensions. Because, like I said, I think he's a great player. It'd be interesting to see how he fits with Capella at the centre and him at the power forward, because he has been starting to stretch out his game and work a bit more on that. But we've not seen him play with this full roster. Obviously, Capella's been injured as well, so it'd be interesting to see. But I think keeping him on side whilst not signing him is my bullet point 2, because I think all the pieces are there. I like the coach. I like where they're headed. They just need to keep heading in that right direction by doing those 2 things. And for me, the Hawks will go from strength to strength.
I guess if it doesn't work out, you could always offer him up in a trade piece, whether it's a trade deadline, etc. That's all something that someone might want to take into your hand, especially if they've got a lot of cap space to offer him a big time extension if you're not meeting on numbers. And obviously then you can go out and add more in your draft, or add your draft picks together to try and trade for a different, obviously more established star in a position that you might need more value. You might appreciate more if it didn't work out.
Yeah, that's it. He's a valuable piece. It's just, how do you use him? That's the question. So that's my take on the Atlanta Hawks.
Cool. Nice. I like that. I agree with everything you said, 100%. And I think Collins is a good player, but I do think they shouldn't rush to an extension, and the best thing could be to trade. the best thing could be to extend at the value he wants if it works out, or the best thing could be to try and get him a cheap contract. I think they just need more time as a team to work out what the best is and almost not do a nix and not rush into paying someone too much too soon. So yeah, I agree completely.
Lovely. Who's up next for you?
I started with a team I thought was most likely to bounce back, so I'm going to end with the second most likely. So before we get to them, I will go with the Detroit Pistons. A little bit stuck in no man's land over the years. Obviously got Dwayne Casey as coach now. We know they've got a new GM. So my first bullet point is, to go along with that new GM, is a full rebuild. So trade Blake Griffin. I love Blake Griffin. I don't think he loves Detroit. I think he'd rather see himself in Miami or a team like that. And I just think it's best to trade him now. I don't think they're going to be in a position to win anything during his contract, which I think is over 2 or 3 more years. I don't think that's going to be there. So he's almost going to win you too many games to get a low enough pick potentially if next year he's fully fit, or you're paying someone a lot of money. He's got a huge cap hit of over 38 million, I think, in his final year, 30 million this year, to almost be injured at times. He's got a huge amount of injury history, and I just think it's better to rebuild, because you can probably get a first for him, a couple of twos, future one. Obviously not a high pick, but you'll be able to get something good. But more importantly, you'll be able to move off that cap space, open up that position for a younger player, not pay someone to be injured as much as he probably is, and get your new GM to rebuild around players or a star player that he chooses rather than what's already there. I just don't think Blake wants to be there very long. I think it could get to a point where he asks for a trade in his last year and his value is going to shoot down at that point. So cash on him whilst his value is as high as it is. That'd be my first bullet point. And second bullet point, a bit of a tricky one, this one, because obviously new GM, you don't know his thinking. The roster's very, very random, to be honest. Derrick Rose gets talked about a lot, but he hasn't got a long-term deal, and he's not on a huge enough cap hit really to make a difference. He could be a sort of player to get fans to come and watch whilst you also lose games. So I went with the second bullet point of make a draft splash. They've got a few extra second-round picks over the years. Obviously, in my scenario, they've traded Blake Griffin for extra picks. So either focus on this year's draft or next year's draft, whatever your scouting team say. So you'd focus on this year because we've had obviously a better college year. We don't have a clue what's going to happen next year in terms of college basketball. A lot of the picks for this year's draft play abroad. Next year, a lot of players are going to move to the G League instead of going to college, so that's going to throw out a lot of one-year players as well. So either if you're more confident with this year's class, which isn't as strong on paper, or you're more confident in saying, oh, next year won't matter if there's no college basketball, we'll still get to scout the players in a certain way. I like next year's class. I think they should package a lot of their picks to try and have a really strong draft in one of the 2 years, go all in, whichever they think is best, and just try and rebuild that team again with a lot of youth and a lot of athleticism and a lot more three-point shooting than they've had over the years. That would be my 2 bullet points for the Pistons.
Nice. Yeah. I think that's the thing with them. They either need to commit to one way or the other. Either get rid of Blake, get some draft picks in and do it that way, or some reason build around him. I don't think he's the same player he used to be. I absolutely love him as well. But
yeah, very good 3-point shooter for the way he plays as well. Yeah. But I just think his timeline doesn't match up with them, so why not utilize that to try and sort the future out? And you could almost combine the 2 bullet points. You could move Blake Griffin with a pick from this year to move higher up in this year's draft, or you could move this pick and Blake Griffin together to try and get another pick for next year. So it almost, like I said, it depends what this GM wants to do, which year he thinks is better draft class or which year's got better draft value, and then focus around that. And I think he could use picks and Blake Griffin to try and build up that. So that'd be my plan if I was him.
Blake's just on that horrible contract, isn't he? 36.5 million next season, 38 or almost 39 million.
Yeah, 39 on his last year, which is the second most behind Chris Paul, I think.
Yeah, it's a lot. And, but again, they've got those odd pieces you can pick out that are, you start saying, "Oh, commit to these slightly younger players and build them up." Could have something start going. Sekou Doumbouya, Luke Kennard. There's a couple of shining lights, but like you said, they need to just commit to that sort of rebuild, don't they?
Yeah, they're just not on the right timeline with both their different players and almost unfortunately their coach obviously is a very good coach. He's a winner and he likes long-term projects, but obviously even for him it's almost a tough ask. You've got everyone in the organisation on different paths. You've got a brand new GM. You've got this coach that has previously won a lot of games. You've got one all-star player. You've got loads of young players. You've got underperforming young players. You've got Derek Rose. It's all very mixed match. They need to focus on one way or the other, and I think trading Blake could be the way to do it.
Just seen the contracts are still paying off behind the scenes as well.
Yeah, they've got a lot of dead cap. One of the most, obviously, I think.
Josh Smith somehow, Markieff Morris, Joe Johnson's in there. There's
they've obviously just traded Drummond as well, haven't they?
Yes, which is a good linking point, I think.
They've almost started that rebuild, like I said, so just go full-fledged. But now we know it's Drummond, I think we know who you're on to.
Yeah, just like quickly, last point on them. It's very difficult for them because they're in a dwindling market at the moment because they're not getting bums on seats. So for a team
that franchise is struggling,
isn't getting money in through the door, is coming off the back of a pandemic where they would have lost a ton of money to then dump their biggest pulling point in Blake Griffin to then start losing on purpose, essentially, to drop down to get a good drop. It asks a lot of the fans in Detroit to keep paying and keep staying behind that team. But
look how many games they lost with him.
Yeah, it needs to be done, definitely. So
either that or, like you said, you trade assets, like your suggestion of building around Blake, and you get players that fit his timeline, his style. Like in that sense, obviously you've almost got to go for it. You've got to sacrifice 2 years worth of drafting to try and get more pieces around him now to have a playoff run, haven't you? So
yeah,
which one's going to be harder? Probably option 2, but see what the GM wants to do.
So yeah, like we mentioned there, Drummond moves us swiftly on to my next team, my beautiful Cavaliers. They're an absolute mess.
To be fair, at least 6 of these 8 teams are a complete mess anyway. There's only one really that isn't.
Feel a little bit better. My first point is to figure out what team you want. Do you want to press forward with this, again, young talent you've got? Or do you still want to keep playing the guys of the LeBron age? I mean, because they still contribute. It's difficult. I personally think they need to let Tristan Thompson go. As much as I love him for the way he plays and his style and the energy he brings, let him go or sign and trade. They need to get Kevin Love off the books. I think.
God, look at the amount of money they're paying on 4 bigs. So Tristan Drummond, Kevin Love. That equals 40, 60, 80, $100 million nearly on those 4 bigs.
They are guard and big heavy. They are lacking in wings.
No wing.
That's where they need to bolster. So, like, my first point is to commit to direction and clear the decks. So, let Thompson go, trade Love, perhaps keep Drummond, and
probably stuck with Drummond though, aren't they?
See what he brings to the table. I mean, Drummond pads a stat sheet. He can 20 and 20, but all the teams he's been on haven't been that good. So it makes me feel a little bit wary. Is he that good on paper because he's on a bad team, or is the team bad because he's kind of a bit selfish in that respect? We'll see next season. And then it's get some wings in. Some defensive wings at that, because I like the young pieces they've got. I think Cedi Osman improves every season. Colin Sexton shows a lot of potential. And they've got the bigs there ready to go. I think Zizic off the bench is fine. sign him back up, and Drummond as your front centre, absolutely fine. And then they've got Kevin Porter, again, could improve massively. But most of these people are Darius Garland, obviously, as well. They're all great offensive players. A, can they work together? And B, who out of those can defend? None. So they need to then concentrate on either, perhaps even using, if they can find some cap space somewhere, to sign some older wings that are happy to defend and just be playing and help these guys, bring them on, show them the ropes, give them some little helpful tips, and develop the squad that way. So those would be my two sort of points for them: is clear the decks and commit to the younger team, and then flesh it out with some 1 or 2 year vet contracts to help toughen them up and show them what it actually takes to win and to defend and keep teams outscoring you, basically. So those are my 2 big points for the Cavaliers.
Yeah, just looking at Spot Track now, where you can do positional spending graphs. If you look at the centre position, right, they've got 8 centres on their roster currently. I know, obviously, because the season's still going, they'll count it as now, but obviously their season is finished, so they will have 8 centres playing for them. But they're paying 8 centres at a total of $79 million, which is 60% of their total cap spend, which is just nuts. Bearing in mind, no one even plays centres anymore on average.
No, I know. It is
crazy.
It's baffling, isn't it?
They just wanted to get extra picks for the Drummond trade, which I understand. And they probably missed out on trading Tristan Thompson. They probably should have traded him earlier, but like you said, just move on might be the best idea now.
He's such a fan favourite, and Cleveland love him, and fans love him. But
they're not going to pay him, so
they've shown it with like Verjao and stuff. That's not always enough to keep you around.
Mm-hmm.
Business is business at the end of the day, and I think you're right. They should have traded him at the beginning of this season when his trade worth was a hell of a lot higher than it is now. I mean, when he plays well, and he's had a decent season when he's not been injured. But
yeah, well, he's basically a free agent now, isn't he?
Yeah, so I think just let him go. And if he wants to play in Cleveland, then sign him to a cheaper deal.
Yeah, it makes sense. One little devil's advocate just for this one, because I know this is your team, so I'll spend a little bit more time on it.
Go on.
They've drafted 2 point guards that play very similarly, exact same position, very similar usage.
Yeah.
What do? Do you go with one over the other? Like what I read anyway, all the experts obviously want them to do. Garland being the one, because Sexton obviously really struggles to shoot. Or do you keep both on the roster, developing both at the same time, but A, moving one to shooting guard, or B, not starting one? Is that going to almost cause a logjam for a very early first round pick in both cases?
I think they should use one as a piece in the trade, either for a draft pick or, again, like I said, a sort of a better wing player, perhaps. I mean,
that makes sense.
You look at the point guards they've got available. They've got Darius Garland, Dante Exum, Matthew Dellavedova.
I think's a free agent as well.
Yeah, who I think will resign. He's a great off the bench player. He's one of those ones that actually can play defense, even though he's a little bit undersized. But he'll get stuck in. He's a pest. And Colin Sexton, you don't need all of these point guards. Commit.
Which guard would you go with for the future of your team if you were the GM there?
I would go with Darius Garland, I think, and see what you can get for Sexton. Just in terms of what they each bring to the table, Garland's a younger and a bit fresher to it, and is still essentially at the same point as Sexton, who's already been here a year or two. So, yeah, a year or 2 years. So,
cool.
That's probably the way I'd go.
I think going back to an earlier point, I think the Warriors could be the exact sort of team that maybe come looking for a Kevin Love if there's a way they can fit it around cap space with trade. That could be an interesting player for them to go after. You never know. He definitely will want to go to a championship contending team, whichever one it is.
Yeah, he could be great for them. Go back to
Yeah, he
old
could help
Bert.
most teams, couldn't he?
Yeah, get in, rebound, space the floor. Could be a good match.
Cool. That links us quite well to the next team. Speaking of Kevin Love, the Minnesota Timberwolves
Ooh.
is my fourth team. Like I said earlier, I started with the team I thought would most likely bounce back out of the whole 8, if I'm honest. Obviously, with the Warriors, which is an easy answer. And the second team I'd think are likely to bounce back in the next year or two is probably the Timberwolves. We all know, obviously, the big trade they did last year to get rid of Wiggins. Move on from that. It wasn't working out. Got yourself a new piece in Russell, who's obviously Cat's best friend, so that works out quite well. They're both on max deals now. They're both on long-term deals, so they are the future. So how do you build around them? So my first bullet point is use this year's 2 first-round picks. Obviously, they've got their own, and they've also got the Nets pick, because the Nets are going to finish with the bubble. They're going to finish outside the top 16 picks, which means it stays with the Timberwolves.
Yeah.
So use those 2 first-round picks well. So whichever way you think that is. So trade up to get, if there's a star that you want in the position you need. There are a lot of wings in this draft. Or stick where you are and add wings from this draft in terms of depth. So there's a lot of wings in this draft, like I just said. But rather than trade up and adding your star wing, whichever one that is, maybe you sit where you are for both picks and just take 2 wings to add to your big in Cat, and then obviously D'Angelo Russell as your point guard for the next 4 or 5 years. I think whichever one they choose, if there's a wing they think is good enough to trade up for, then do that. If you don't, then I think they should use both picks on wings that can space the floor and defend as well. Obviously, we know Cat and Russell aren't known for defending, but are known for offense. If you can add a lot of athletic wings that can shoot, more unlike Wiggins, and obviously on a smaller contract than Wiggins, I think that'd be perfect. And my second bullet point was to trade James Johnson. Nothing against James Johnson, not his biggest fan. I understand they've got quite a bit of cap space. Well, they haven't got a lot of cap space, but they've got a lot of underpaid players. But obviously, when you have 2 max players at a young age, that takes up a lot of cap space. And James Johnson's got 16 million cap hit for next year.
Wow.
And I think he could be this perfect sort of player to either package with a pick or just to trade out for 2 smaller players in terms of value or for another future pick. I just think he's not needed on that team. And I think that 16 million could halt their progress. I think they could use it in other areas. So my point would be to sign wings on draft contracts and then get rid of James Johnson, obviously, who is a more of a wing-based player, to save 16 million and either get more picks, more players, or just to save money and then go at the free agency the year after. How I would fix the Timberwolves.
I love the getting rid of James Johnson because I think that if you can free up the money to re-sign Hernan Gomez and Beasley, because they're going to bring more to the team than James Johnson. Full stop. And
yeah, definitely. And I think you can get a good pick for Johnson because people want that ability, and he's an expiring contract. So I think they'll be able to almost benefit more from trading him than definitely playing him. Yeah, and like you said, I just think they've got other players that are more important. They've got Evan Turner at the moment, obviously on a huge deal, but he is a free agent this year, so they lose that money. So if they lose the 16 million from him as well, you'd be talking about over 30 million in cap space for the year after. Like earlier when I mentioned, 40 million in cap space when I mentioned all those free agents in the summer after. And then obviously you've got players like Jarrett Culver on very cheap deals, Jake Layman on cheap deals. And then, like you said, you can maybe get Hernan Gomez and Beasley at middle deals and try and keep them around long term whilst adding another star in the future. I think that would be their perfect way of going forward.
Future's quite bright for them, really, isn't it?
Yeah, they got Spellman as well off Timberwolves, which is nice. And they've obviously got their 2 main players are on max contracts, but they're on max contracts at the age of 24. So when their deals finish, they're going to be 28, which is obviously a slight worry because they're the same draft class. So you're going to have to re-sign them at the same time. So you could literally, especially when they're friends, you could literally either re-sign them all or lose them all in the same summer. So your team's almost vying on that one summer. So you've basically got 4 years to either convince them to stay in terms of being near championship contention or to contend in the 4 years, so you can utilize that contract. So I think that's going to be quite key. Oh no, sorry. Carl Towns does have one extra year because the Warriors only signed D'Angelo to 4 years, so they've got 4 years with Russell, and then obviously if he leaves, Cat's probably going to want to leave anyway. So
Yeah.
they are still on a 4-year window. Yeah, and I just think this year is not a write-off as such. You want to build your team around those two players. You want to use, like I said, add the wings to give them a year to experience. But then I think the season after next, when you've got that big free agency class, that's the season when, right, we want to win the title in the next 2 years from that period and just try and utilize all these stars that they're going to have.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I just hope Cat stays happy, and it'd be nice to see him getting some wins. I love him as a player. He's just not had the greatest of luck or situations around him, has he?
No, he's been underused and overused in random areas and not used late in games, and then really used in the first quarter and almost not tiring himself out for the second quarter at times in weird games. It's been a bit of a nightmare. And I think they've done the perfect thing keeping him happy and adding literally his best friend in the NBA.
Yeah.
And actually one of my favourite players in the NBA. I actually did think it would have been a very cool experiment. The Warriors probably should have kept him, but obviously they got extra draft capital and tried to add an extra wing. So I think it's worked out well for the Timberwolves, but you can't afford to waste the next 2 seasons because I think you could almost be getting into a point where you lose Cat early. So
Yeah,
next 2 years are crucial.
Nice.
Who's your? Well, we should all know who your last team is, but we'll let you introduce them.
The Charlotte Hornets. When we sort of split the teams, and I kind of gave myself the Charlotte Hornets, I kind of almost kicked myself. I was looking at them like, yeah, what the do you do?
Who chooses the Charlotte Hornets in anything?
Exactly, and that is my biggest point: is to somehow get interesting. Your owner is Michael Jordan, and you are the least relevant team in the whole league. No one cares about you at the moment, or has done for 5 or 6 years. They've got some horrible contracts. Well, they're losing Biombo this season, which is fine. They're going to lose that 70 million. They've got Nick Batum who can opt in, and they're going to be using 27 million on him.
Yeah, think about this, right? Not this season. So next summer, not this summer. At the moment, they're standing with all the current players to have minus 2 million cap space. That's after using Biombo, like you said. This is not this summer. This is the year after. Like they're an absolute cap hell.
And their best player, well, maybe not in everybody's. Cody Zeller, I think, is on about what he's worth. Absolutely fine. That is a good contract. But their best players are like Dwayne Bacon and Devontae Graham, who are on 1.4 and 1.6 million. And then you've got Terry Rozier, who obviously came over in the Kemba trade, who looked better on the Celtics than he does now. I think they made him look better. And obviously Nick Batum was a great player, but is nowhere now.
Yeah, but even Cody Zeller, though, if you look at it in 2021-22, his cap holds $24 million. Cody Zeller, like, it's just a nightmare. Like in 3 years' time, they've only got $12 million cap space. Like you'd think of all the horrible contracts that if you just fast forward to 3 years' time, you'd be like, right, think of how many free agents we can sign. But no, they've got no money.
Which stuff?
Absolutely nuts.
The ways I was thinking about this. So I looked at them. I was like, "You're boring. How can we spice you up? Sign a big free agent, and then you go and look at the contracts, and that scuppers that point. They can't sign anyone. They can't
until summer of 22. I don't think
exactly so that's another 2 years of the boring Charlotte Hornets struggling along, not doing anything, unless Devontae Graham and Dwayne Bacon and people like that do kick on massively. It's just an absolute struggle. The other option is to somehow blow it all up, trade everyone, dump everything, tank massively. Like they for some reason they turn up every season and they fight for those playoff spots. And I just think, why? You're just hurting yourselves. just have a season where you just drop off the edge. No one would care. No one even knows who you are, where you are at the moment anyway. Stop fighting for playoffs. It does you no benefit. Drop a couple of places, get a good couple of draft picks going. And so those were like my options for them. And it's just, they're a stumper. They're a real stumper. And again, like I said with the Bulls, maybe they can somehow use Michael Jordan and the Last Dance sort of hype to bring something back to them. But I don't know. And I guess they're losing the Marvin Williams and the Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, which are ticking over in the background this season as well. It's 15 and 13 million on top of their actual contracts. I really struggled with this team.
They're in the worst place in the NBA, that's for sure.
They're just floating around, just signing average players to terrible contracts, going too high up so they don't get a good draft pick, but not high enough up to make playoffs. And it's horrible to see a team doing this because, like, I've enjoyed watching the Hornets in the past. Obviously, back when they were New Orleans with Chris Paul.
It's a long time ago.
Yeah, and then the brief spell they had with Kemba and Al Jefferson, Big Al. Fine, like they've had some success, but it's even then, with these marquee players, they didn't really do that well. So
yeah. The other thing as well, though, right, is if you think about all these teams we've spoken about, if they haven't got amazing assets that are young, right, a lot of them have had draft picks.
Yeah,
they've only got their own first-round pick forever. They've not managed to suck and trade players and do anything possible to add any first-round picks at all. So they've only got their own first-round pick forever and then a couple of extra twos. And a lot of the extra twos are actually other teams' twos, which are probably going to be worse picks than their own two. So It's like, I know they've got a first-round pick, and if they're rubbish, they're going to have a good pick every year. I understand that. So they're going to add picks that way. But a lot of these teams that suck at the moment have got 3 or 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 first-round picks in the next... Yeah, in the next like 3, 4, 5 years. Well, you've got playoff teams like OKC with like 6 or 7 first-round picks in like 3 years, and a team this bad with this many bad overpaid players, you think, oh well, at least they've got draft capital. Nope, they haven't even got that.
Unfortunately, it boils down to ownership and leadership, and what are they doing in the front office? As an owner, Michael, why are you not stepping in and saying, we need to sort this out? Does he just not care?
He's too busy beating them all one-on-one before games, like he says he does.
He turns up to games. Yeah, no one cares. Like, if you cared about this franchise, Margo, you wouldn't turn up and beat them one-on-one. You turn up and train them, coach them. I don't know. Maybe the other option is to get rid of Cody Zeller, and you lose that Bismack Biyombo, and just try, like I said, trade everyone, dump everything, abandon ship.
That's what I would do.
And
I just keep anyone who's on a rookie deal and trade everybody else.
Go from the ass end up.
Terry Rozier, you've almost got to keep, haven't you?
Yeah, you're not going to get rid of that contract. 19 mil this year, 18 next, 17 after that.
Yeah, and he's quite young, so.
Yeah, 26. And obviously Batum, you're going to have that on your books. So just start stinking more. Like, commit to it.
Move to Seattle.
Yeah, maybe. Sell the team, Michael. Sell the team.
Buy the Knicks, Michael. That's fine, Mike. Buy the Knicks.
What, you'd rather see the Knicks as a middling team with terrible... Oh, wait. They are a middling team with terrible contract.
He'd be right in New York. He'd come back out of retirement and play with his dodgy fingers.
Cigar in one hand.
Yeah.
But there you go. That is our Delete 8 Kiss special.
Nice. I think there's some really good points there. In fact, to put you on the... I don't know what the phrase is. In fact, to put you under pressure...
on the spot?
Obviously, we'll take Warriors out because they're going to be a top 4 team, in my opinion, at a bare minimum. But out of those 8, which 2 do you see being a playoff team as soon as next season that isn't the Warriors? And we'll end on that note.
The Hawks and the Bulls. I genuinely believe they've got
Well, out of
So
both
much
lists or just your list?
out of both lists. I genuinely believe they've got so much potential. I
I
guess
struggle to see the Bulls. I struggle to see the Bulls over the Timberwolves.
Just guess the Timberwolves. I always forget about them.
I don't like Zach LaVine, so I'm biased.
Okay. I don't know. It's difficult to pull those three apart because all three have talented rosters. All three potentially need a coaching change or a few extra players to pad out the roster, and all
But
three have suffered with injuries. So it's difficult to see what the full team's going to look like.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say with the injuries. Like, it's a difficult thing to consider, but almost if you had to pick 2 of the 8, I can sense that you're more Warriors and Hawks. I think the Hawks are the clear one out, like you see over the Bulls and Timberwolves. I think just because of the more talent. Would that be right?
Yeah, I think so. I think they've really just perched themselves in a lovely position to kick on next season. They've just got those few little pieces missing, and I think the negative media really affected them this season. And it was the I think they're just they're primed and ready to kick on. So those are going to be my picks.
Yeah, I would maybe agree. It's very difficult with the Hawks, very young, so they're going to be hit and miss, aren't they? But yeah, I would say that them Timberwolves and the Warriors are definitely the strongest 3 for next year. Obviously, certain teams have got longer term futures, but there's not many playoff teams I can see falling out at the moment. There's a lot of strong playoff teams, so we'll have to see.
I guess that's the reason why I went sort of more. Yeah, it's going to be those teams sort of in the east side that might be able to claw their way up, sort of maybe knock a Orlando Magic out or one of those kind of guys.
Yeah, I think the Magic are definitely the one that they'll be trying to catch. I do think the East would be a lot easier to get up there than the West. If you look at obviously the fact there's no Warriors, just say the teams what they are. There's no Warriors and there's no Blazers in the West playoffs at the moment. They're pretty much playoff locks for the last 5 years. So it's hard to catch that group.
That's what I mean. You're talking about the only 2 teams we've sort of talked about from the West are the Timberwolves and Golden State. And if you're picking those 2 to try and claw up, you've got to look at who they've got to then beat out. Even the ones that haven't made the playoffs in the West. You look at that and think, Jesus, how are they going to make it?
The Warriors almost make it harder for all the other teams that we're talking about from the West, like the Timberwolves, because obviously the Warriors almost just they add a playoff team straight away, and then your eighth seed at the moment is now your 9th seed, and then if you're the Timberwolves, you're like, oh right, we're the bottom now, we're below the Suns, we've got to get 4 or 5 spaces up the league.
As Kings, Grizzlies, Trailblazers it's
difficult.
It's sickening to think about if you're in the West right now.
Yeah, cool. Well, I think that's a good place to end it. I think there'll be a lot of good and bad things for certain fan bases to hear from that. So cheers for that, mate. That was a good idea from you.
Thank you very much.
So yeah, next week, we said earlier, Ben, the plan is to, later this week, the plan is to interview our friend Joel. We're going to ask him a few things, and you're going to ask both of us about some sneaker stuff. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. We're send that all out soon. It's going to be a good one for those sneakerheads out there.
Yeah, that'll be end of the week, and then come back next week again for another early pod, a bit of a longer one again next week. So yeah, should be good. Anything you want to sign off on, or should we leave it there?
No, I don't think so. I think we're good to go.
Cool. Well, all right. Thanks everyone for listening. We're going to run a competition alongside our sneaker episode, so watch out for that. That'll all be on our Twitter, which will be cool. That's our Twitter page @_Hardwood Hoops. And we'll chat to you soon and see you on the flip side. Cheers, Ben. Thanks again, mate.
See you soon.
Bye.